My name is Sophia Martinez. I'm 32 years old. And 3 months ago, my sister Charlotte destroyed our relationship with 7 words that changed everything between us forever. At least I'm not just a waitress. She said it with that smug little smile she'd perfected since we were kids, standing in our parents' living room while the entire family watched. What Charlotte didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just a waitress. I was the CEO and owner of Bella Vista Restaurant Group, a company I'd built from nothing into a 12-location empire, generating over $8 million in annual revenue. But here's the thing that still gives me chills when I think about it. Charlotte said those words exactly 30 minutes before she walked into one of my restaurants for her company's annual holiday party, where my face was plastered on a 20-foot banner reading, "Congratulations to our founder and CEO." If you've enjoyed a story about family drama and sweet justice, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. And hey, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. The fallout from that night was so intense, so perfectly timed, that I still can't believe it actually happened. But before I tell you about the moment that left my entire family speechless, and my sister literally speechless, let me take you back to where this all began. Growing up in our middle-class family in San Antonio, Texas, Charlotte was always the golden child. She got straight A's without trying, played violin in the school orchestra, and had that natural confidence that made adults light up when she walked into a room. Me? I was the dreamy one, always scribbling in notebooks, asking our mom if I could help cook dinner, and spending my allowance on cooking magazines instead of clothes. When Charlotte graduated summa cum laude from UT Austin with her finance degree and immediately landed an analyst position at Goldman Sachs in Dallas, our parents practically threw a parade. They framed her diploma, her offer letter, even her first business card. When I told them I was taking a gap year to work in restaurants and figure things out, the disappointment was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Sophia's just finding herself," Mom would say to relatives, with that strained smile parents use when they're embarrassed but trying to be supportive. "She'll go back to school eventually." Charlotte was less diplomatic. "Why would you waste your potential serving other people food when you could be doing something important?" I was 18 then, working as a server at Margarita's, a family-owned Mexican restaurant near the Riverwalk. The owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, was this tiny woman with calloused hands and eyes that missed nothing. She'd built the restaurant from a food truck 30 years earlier, and she saw something in me that my own family couldn't see. "You watch everything," she told me one day, catching me studying how she organized the kitchen during rush hour. "Most people just do their job. You see the whole machine." Mrs. Rodriguez started teaching me everything, not just serving, but ordering, scheduling, cost analysis, vendor relationships. When I mentioned wanting to learn about the business side, she handed me a stack of restaurant management books and said, "Read these, then we'll talk." Charlotte, meanwhile, was posting Instagram photos from Goldman Sachs company events, wearing designer dresses and networking with Manhattan's financial elite. Her Christmas visits home became performance pieces where she'd casually mention her bonus figures and the famous people she'd met at work functions. "Sophie's still at that little Mexican place," she'd say, like I was stuck in amber. "But hey, someone has to serve the food, right?" What none of them realized was that I was absorbing everything like a sponge. After 2 years at Margarita's, I'd learned more about business operations than most MBA students. Mrs. Rodriguez trusted me to handle vendor negotiations, schedule the kitchen staff, and even design new menu items. The restaurant's profit margins improved by 23% during my time there, and I could break down exactly why. But to my family, I was still just a waitress who'd lost her way. When I turned 21, Mrs. Rodriguez made me an offer that changed my life. I want to retire and travel with my husband. You can buy the restaurant from me, $180,000, and I'll carry the loan at 4% interest. I had exactly $12,000 in savings. Most people would have said it was impossible, but I'd spent 3 years watching Mrs. Rodriguez turn margaritas into a cash-generating machine, and I knew exactly how to replicate her success. I also knew something she didn't. The empty building next door had been quietly acquired by a development company planning a massive mixed-use project. Property values in that area were about to explode. I spent 6 months putting together the most detailed business plan you've ever seen. Revenue projections, market analysis, staffing models, growth timelines, everything. Then I walked into every bank in San Antonio until I found one willing to bet on a 21-year-old waitress with a dream and a bulletproof plan. Commerce Bank gave me the loan. The day I signed the papers to buy margaritas, Charlotte called to tell me about her promotion to associate and her new $150,000 salary. She spent 20 minutes describing her corner office view and the partner track program she'd been selected for. "What's new with you?" she finally asked. "Oh, same old restaurant stuff." I didn't tell her I'd just become a business owner. I didn't tell her because I could already hear her response. Doubt disguised as concern, warnings about how most restaurants fail, suggestions that I should have asked for advice before making such a big decision. Instead, I poured everything into making margaritas exceptional. I implemented digital ordering systems, revamped the menu based on customer data analysis, and created an employee profit-sharing program that reduced turnover by 70%. Within 18 months, revenue had increased by 40%. More importantly, I was learning to see opportunities everywhere. When the mixed-use development broke ground next door, I approached the developer about opening a second location in their food court. They'd seen margaritas lines wrapped around the block and immediately said yes. Not only did they offer me prime real estate at below-market rates, but they introduced me to their investor network. That's how I met David Chen, a venture capitalist who specialized in restaurant franchising. David looked at my numbers. Both locations were now generating combined profits of over $400,000 annually, and asked a question that changed everything. "Have you ever thought about scaling this model?" By age 25, I owned 4 restaurants across Texas. By 27, I had 8 locations in 3 states. Each expansion was strategic, calculated, and profitable from day one. I wasn't just opening restaurants, I was building a brand. Bella Vista Restaurant Group became known for 3 things: exceptional food, innovative technology, and treating employees like partners rather than replacements. My retention rate was 89% in an industry where 50% was considered good. My profit margins were 18%, when the industry average was 11%. Food and Wine magazine featured me in their 30 Under 30 Restaurant Innovators issue. Restaurant Business magazine put me on their cover with the headline, "The Millennial Who's Reinventing Fast Casual." Inc. magazine included Bella Vista in their fastest-growing private companies list for 3 consecutive years. But to my family, I was still just working in restaurants. Charlotte, now a vice president at Goldman with a $300,000 salary, had gotten engaged to Marcus, another finance guy who wore bow ties unironically and called everything either sick or fire. Their engagement party was at the Dallas Country Club, with 200 guests, a string quartet, and champagne that cost more per bottle than most people spend on groceries in a week. "Sophie finally made it to one of our fancy events," Charlotte announced when I arrived, gesturing to my simple black dress. "How did you get time off from the restaurant?" "I asked nicely," I said, not bothering to explain that I'd left my general manager in charge of all 12 locations. The entire evening was a showcase of Charlotte and Marcus's success. He talked about his recent promotion to senior vice president. She mentioned their new penthouse condo in uptown Dallas. They displayed their engagement ring, a 3.5-carat diamond that Marcus had purchased as an investment because diamonds hold their value better than most asset classes. When someone asked what I was up to, Charlotte answered for me. Sophie's still doing her restaurant thing. She's really dedicated to it, which is sweet. Sweet. Like I was a child playing with toys. Meanwhile, I was generating more revenue in a single quarter than Charlotte and Marcus combined made in an entire year. But I stayed quiet, smiled politely, and let them have their moment. The truth was, I'd gotten addicted to the secrecy. There was something intoxicating about being underestimated while simultaneously outperforming everyone's expectations. Every dismissive comment, every patronizing smile, every time Charlotte introduced me as her sister who works in food service, just added fuel to my fire. The breaking point came last December at our annual Martinez family Christmas party. This wasn't just immediate family. We're talking aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. Nearly 40 people crowded into my parents' house in their suburban neighborhood. Charlotte and Marcus had driven down from Dallas in their new BMW M8. Marcus made sure everyone saw him park it prominently in front of the house. Charlotte was wearing what I later learned was a $2,800 Stella McCartney dress and carrying a Hermes bag that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The moment they walked in, it was like watching a royal entrance. Relatives flocked to them, asking about the wedding planning, the new condo, Charlotte's career. She'd recently been promoted to director at Goldman, putting her on track for managing director before age 35. We're looking at houses in Highland Park, she announced during dinner, referring to Dallas's most exclusive neighborhood. Marcus thinks we should start building generational wealth through real estate. Marcus nodded sagely, adjusting his bow tie. Location, location, location. You've got to think long-term about asset appreciation. Everyone was appropriately impressed. My cousin Jessica asked about the wedding budget. My Aunt Maria wanted to know if they'd met any celebrities through Marcus's work with high-net-worth clients. My Uncle Roberto joked about whether they needed a personal chef for their fancy new lifestyle. Then Charlotte's eyes landed on me, sitting quietly at the kids' table because all the adult seats had been taken by relatives, eager to bask in her reflected success. What about you, Sophie? Any exciting updates from the restaurant world? The way she said restaurant world made it sound like I was reporting from a different planet. The entire room turned to look at me, 40 pairs of eyes waiting for my update from the land of food service. Nothing too exciting, I said. Just keeping busy. Still at that same place? Asked my cousin David, who worked as a middle manager at a car dealership, and somehow thought that made him more successful than me. She's branched out a little, Charlotte said before I could answer. Last I heard, you were working at multiple restaurants now, right, Sophie? Very industrious. She was technically correct. I was working at multiple restaurants because I owned them. But her tone made it sound like I was hustling between part-time jobs just to pay rent. Something like that, I said. Marcus jumped in with what he probably thought was helpful career advice. Have you ever considered transitioning into restaurant management? There's actually decent money in food service administration if you get with the right corporate chain. The hospitality industry is recession-proof, added my Aunt Carmen, who'd never worked in hospitality a day in her life. People always need to eat. Charlotte smiled that patronizing smile I knew so well. Sophie's happy doing what she's doing. Not everyone needs to climb the corporate ladder. Some people are perfectly content with simpler lives. Simpler lives. I felt something crack inside my chest, like a guitar string wound too tight finally snapping. Around the table, relatives nodded approvingly at Charlotte's wisdom and understanding. Look how gracious she was, accepting her sister's limited ambitions. Look how mature she'd become, acknowledging that not everyone could achieve her level of success. That's when Charlotte delivered the killing blow. At least I'm not just a waitress. She said it with a little laugh, like she was making a harmless joke. But her eyes were cold, and I knew exactly what she meant. At least I'm not a failure like you. At least I didn't waste my potential. At least I matter. The room went silent for about 3 seconds, then quickly filled with nervous laughter and people changing the subject. But I caught my mother's face in that moment of silence, saw the flash of embarrassment that she tried to hide. Even my own parents were ashamed of me. I excused myself to the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. Here's what I saw. A 32-year-old woman wearing a $200 dress from Nordstrom, driving a 3-year-old Honda Civic, living in a modest apartment in San Antonio. By every external measure, Charlotte was right. She was the success story, and I was the cautionary tale. But here's what she didn't see. The Rolex Submariner hidden under my sweater sleeve, purchased with my quarterly bonus. The stock portfolio worth $2, $3 million, carefully diversified across tech, real estate, and blue-chip investments. The business bank accounts showing a current balance of $7 million across 12 different restaurant locations. Most importantly, she didn't see the calendar notification on my phone, reminding me about tomorrow night's Goldman Sachs holiday party at Vista del Lago, one of my restaurants. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying Charlotte's words, feeling that familiar mixture of anger and hurt that had followed me through our entire relationship. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't going to swallow it quietly and move on. The next morning, I called my general manager, Patricia, who'd been with me since restaurant number 3 and knew the business better than anyone except me. I need you to make sure Vista del Lago is absolutely perfect tonight, I told her. Goldman Sachs is hosting their annual holiday party there, and it needs to be flawless. When is it not flawless? Patricia laughed. But yeah, I'll do a final walkthrough this afternoon. Are you planning to stop by? Oh, I'll be there. What I didn't tell Patricia was that I'd already confirmed Charlotte would be attending. A quick check of Goldman's Dallas office directory showed her listed as the event coordinator for their holiday celebration. She'd been planning this party for months, probably stressed about every detail being perfect for her colleagues and superiors. I spent the day at my flagship location, going over quarterly reports and approving expansion plans for 3 new restaurants we'd be opening in the spring. My phone kept buzzing with texts from various family members, all variations of "Charlotte didn't mean anything by it," and "You know how she is when she's stressed about the wedding." But the text that stopped me cold came from my mother. "Honey, maybe it's time to think about going back to school or finding something more stable. Charlotte's worried about you." Charlotte was worried about me. I stared at that message for a full 5 minutes, feeling something fundamental shift inside my chest. This wasn't just about sibling rivalry anymore. This was about respect, recognition, and the fact that my own family genuinely believed I was failing at life. At 6:30 p.m., I walked into Vista del Lago wearing a tailored black blazer, dark jeans, and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you own everything around you. The restaurant looked spectacular. Patricia had outdone herself. White orchids on every table, ambient lighting that made everyone look like they belonged in a magazine, and the kind of subtle luxury that whispered rather than shouted. The Goldman Sachs crowd was already in full swing, about 60 people in expensive suits networking over craft cocktails and my executive chef's signature appetizers. I spotted Charlotte immediately. She was wearing a stunning red dress and working the room like the professional she was, introducing colleagues, facilitating conversations, making sure everyone felt important. She looked confident, successful, completely in her element. For a moment, I almost felt proud of her. Then, I heard her talking to a group of senior partners near the bar. "The food here is incredible, and the service has been flawless. I spent weeks researching venues, and this place came highly recommended. The owner is supposed to be some young hotshot who's revolutionizing the industry. One of the partners, a distinguished man in his 50s, raised his glass. Well, whoever they are, they know what they're doing. This is restaurant quality execution at the highest level. Charlotte beamed like she'd personally trained every server in the building. That's when I made my decision. I walked over to Patricia, who was coordinating service from her usual spot near the kitchen. Is everything ready for the presentation? The what? She looked confused. The founder's presentation. You know, the thing we discussed. I was making this up on the spot, but Patricia had learned to roll with my spontaneous decisions. Can you get everyone's attention and introduce me? Patricia's eyes widened as she realized what I was planning. Sophie, are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. Patricia walked to the center of the dining room and politely asked for everyone's attention. The Goldman Sachs crowd gradually quieted down, turning toward her with the mild curiosity of people who'd been drinking expensive wine for 2 hours. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all enjoying your holiday celebration here at Vista del Lago. As the general manager, I wanted to take a moment to introduce someone very special to our restaurant family. I could see Charlotte near the bar, smiling encouragingly at what she assumed was going to be some kind of standard restaurant welcome speech. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the founder and CEO of Bella Vista Restaurant Group, the woman who built this company from a single location into 12 restaurants across 4 states, generating over $8 million in annual revenue, Sophia Martinez. The sound that came out of Charlotte's mouth wasn't quite a gasp and wasn't quite a choke. It was the sound of someone's entire worldview collapsing in real time. I walked to the center of the room as Patricia began applauding, followed by the Goldman Sachs crowd who were clearly impressed by those numbers. $8 million in annual revenue got everyone's attention in that room, especially the senior partners who understood exactly what those figures meant. Thank you, Patricia, and thank you all for choosing Vista del Lago for your celebration tonight. This restaurant represents everything I've learned about hospitality, innovation, and building a business that serves both customers and employees with equal dedication. I could see Charlotte's face in my peripheral vision. She'd gone completely pale, her mouth slightly open, her hand frozen halfway to her wine glass. Around her, colleagues were nodding approvingly and making impressed sounds about the revenue figures Patricia had mentioned. When I started in this industry 14 years ago, I continued, looking directly at Charlotte now, people told me I was wasting my potential. They said serving food wasn't a real career, that I should find something more important to do with my life. Charlotte's eyes were locked on mine, and I could see her rapidly trying to process what was happening. Her little sister, the waitress, the family disappointment, was standing in front of her colleagues claiming to own the restaurant where they were having their company party. But here's what I learned. There's nothing more important than creating spaces where people can celebrate their successes, build relationships, and make memories. Tonight, you're all here celebrating another successful year at Goldman Sachs, and I'm honored that you chose my restaurant as the place to do that. The Goldman crowd was eating this up. Restaurant success stories were catnip to financial professionals. They loved hearing about entrepreneurs who'd built businesses from nothing. Several people were already pulling out their phones to take pictures and probably Google my company, but I wasn't done. The restaurant industry taught me everything I know about leadership, financial management, and building teams that care about excellence. Every day, I get to work with incredible people who are passionate about creating exceptional experiences. And every quarter, when I look at our profit and loss statements showing consistent growth and industry-leading margins, I remember why I fell in love with this business in the first place. Charlotte's phone was in her hand now, and I could see her frantically typing, probably Googling Bella Vista Restaurant Group, or Sophia Martinez, CEO. Her face was cycling through emotions like a broken slot machine: confusion, disbelief, embarrassment, and something that might have been panic. One of the senior partners approached me as I finished speaking. Ms. Martinez, I have to say, these numbers Patricia mentioned are incredibly impressive. 8 million in annual revenue across 12 locations? What's your average per unit revenue? About $670,000 per location annually, I replied smoothly, though our flagship restaurants like this one generate closer to $900,000. We focus on operational efficiency and employee retention, which allows us to maintain profit margins significantly above industry standards. The partner's eyebrows rose. That's exceptional. Are you considering franchising or seeking investment partners for expansion? Over his shoulder, I could see Charlotte approaching us, her face now set in the kind of determined expression she wore when she was trying to regain control of a situation. Actually, I said, loud enough for Charlotte to hear, we're entirely self-funded. I believe in building sustainable growth rather than rapid expansion that requires external capital. Charlotte finally reached us, her professional smile plastered in place, but her eyes shooting daggers. Sophie, what a surprise to see you here. The partner looked between us, clearly sensing some kind of tension. You two know each other? She's my sister, Charlotte said, and I could hear her trying to figure out how to spin this situation. Though I had no idea she was involved with this restaurant. Involved, not owned, not founded. Involved. Well, Charlotte has always been very focused on her own career, I said pleasantly. I'm sure she's been too busy with her success at Goldman to keep track of what I'm doing in the restaurant world. What happened next was like watching a slow-motion car crash. Charlotte spent the next hour trying to navigate a room full of her colleagues who were now incredibly interested in her sister, the successful restaurant entrepreneur. Every conversation became a minefield. Someone would ask how long I'd been in the restaurant business, and Charlotte would have to admit she didn't really know. Someone would mention being impressed by my company's growth, and Charlotte would have to smile and nod while clearly having no idea what they were talking about. The worst moment came when Marcus showed up, fashionably late from another work event. He walked straight to Charlotte, bow tie perfectly adjusted, ready to charm her colleagues with his own success stories. Sorry I'm late, babe. Traffic from the Omni was brutal. He kissed Charlotte's cheek and turned to the group with his practiced networking smile. I hope Charlotte's been telling you all about our new place in Highland Park. We're really excited about the investment potential in that area. The senior partner who'd been talking to me earlier smiled politely. Actually, we've been hearing about Charlotte's sister's restaurant business. Very impressive operation she's built. Marcus looked confused. Charlotte's sister? Sophie? He glanced around the room like he was looking for someone else. Is she here? I'm right here, Marcus, I said, stepping into their circle. Thanks for asking. Oh, hey Sophie. Yeah. Charlotte mentioned you work at restaurants. That's cool. He turned back to the senior partner, clearly ready to change the subject to something more impressive. So, what do you think about the current market volatility? We're seeing some interesting opportunities in municipal bonds. Actually, the senior partner interrupted, Sophie owns this restaurant, and 11 others. She's built quite an empire. Marcus's face went through the same emotional journey Charlotte's had an hour earlier. Confusion, disbelief, then a desperate look at Charlotte for confirmation. Charlotte's voice was barely above a whisper. Sophie, can we talk privately? Of course. Excuse us, gentlemen. We walked to a quiet corner near the wine display, Charlotte's heels clicking loudly on the hardwood floors I'd personally selected during the restaurant's design phase. When we were out of earshot, she turned to face me with an expression I'd never seen before, part anger, part humiliation, part something that might have been respect. What the hell is going on, Sophie? I own 12 restaurants, Charlotte. I have for several years now. This is what I do. But you never said? I mean, when we talk, you act like you're just working at restaurants, not owning them. You never asked. You just assumed. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her mentally reviewing every conversation we'd had over the past few years. Every dismissive comment, every patronizing smile, every time she'd introduced me as her sister, who works in food service. $8 million? She whispered. Annual revenue, yes. Net profit is about $1. $4 million annually. Charlotte's hands were shaking slightly as she processed this information. $1. $4 million? Sophie, that's more than Marcus and I make combined. I know. But why didn't you tell us? Why let us think you were struggling? This was the question I'd been expecting, and I'd had years to think about the answer. Because every time I tried to share anything about my work, you dismissed it. When I mentioned learning about food costs and vendor relationships, you called it restaurant stuff like it wasn't real business. When I talked about operational challenges, you'd change the subject to your real job. So I stopped sharing. Charlotte's face crumpled slightly. But Sophie, we're family. We're supposed to support each other. Are we? Because last night, in front of 40 relatives, you said, "At least I'm not just a waitress." Like being me was the worst thing you could imagine. She winced. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. You absolutely meant it. And you know what? It was the push I needed to stop hiding. The rest of the evening was surreal. Charlotte spent the remainder of the party fielding questions from colleagues who wanted to know more about her incredibly successful sister. She handled it with professional grace, but I could see the strain in her smile, the way she kept glancing at me like she was seeing a stranger. Marcus, meanwhile, went into full damage control mode, suddenly very interested in my business model and asking detailed questions about restaurant franchising opportunities. The man who'd suggested I consider transitioning into restaurant management was now trying to network his way into my industry. But the most satisfying moment came near the end of the evening, when the senior partner who'd been talking to me earlier approached Charlotte directly. Your sister is remarkable, he told her. We work with a lot of entrepreneurs in our private wealth management division, and her numbers are impressive. Building a profitable restaurant business is one of the hardest things to do in business, and she's done it 12 times over. Charlotte nodded and smiled, probably dying inside. You must be very proud, he continued. Yes, Charlotte said quietly. I am. As the Goldman Sachs crowd began filtering out, leaving behind compliments about the food, the service, and the beautiful venue, Charlotte lingered near the bar. Marcus had gone to get the car, leaving us alone for the first time since my revelation. Sophie, she said finally, I owe you an apology. Do you? I've been terrible to you. For years. And I didn't even realize how terrible until tonight. I leaned against the bar, studying my sister's face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine remorse. The thing is, Charlotte, I don't think you were trying to be terrible. I think you genuinely believed your version of success was the only version that mattered. But why didn't you correct me? Why let me make a fool of myself? Because I was building something and I didn't want to defend it every step of the way. I didn't want to justify my choices to people who'd already decided they weren't worth justifying. Charlotte was quiet for a long moment, running her finger around the rim of her wineglass. $8 million, she said again, like she was trying to make the number feel real. It's not about the money, Charlotte. Then what is it about? It's about the fact that you've spent 14 years thinking I was failing at life, and you never once asked if maybe you didn't understand what I was actually doing. The drive back to my parents' house was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Charlotte had texted everyone that she had big news about me and wanted to gather the family together. I'd agreed to come, partly out of curiosity and partly because I was tired of hiding. When we walked into the living room, where the same 40 relatives had been sitting less than 24 hours earlier, the energy was completely different. Instead of eager faces waiting to hear about Charlotte's latest achievement, everyone looked confused and slightly concerned. My mother was the first to speak. "Sophie, honey, Charlotte said something about restaurants and business ownership? We're a little confused." I looked around the room at faces I'd known my entire life, aunts and uncles who'd watched me grow up, cousins who'd played with me as a child, family friends who'd asked about my restaurant job with barely concealed pity for years. "I own 12 restaurants," I said simply. "I started with one location 14 years ago, and I've been building the business ever since. Last year, my company generated over $8 million in revenue." The silence that followed was different from the previous night's uncomfortable pause. This was shocked silence, the kind that happens when people's fundamental assumptions about reality get turned upside down. My cousin David, the car dealership manager who'd been condescending about my career choices just yesterday, was the first to recover. 12 restaurants. "Sophie, that's incredible." "Wait," said my Aunt Carmen, the one who'd lectured me about hospitality being recession-proof. "You mean you own them? Like, actually own them?" "Yes. I started by buying the restaurant where I worked, then expanded from there. It's been a gradual process, but very successful." My uncle Roberto, who'd made jokes about Charlotte and Marcus needing a personal chef, was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Sophie, why didn't you tell us any of this?" Before I could answer, Charlotte spoke up from beside me. "Because we never asked. We just assumed we knew what she was doing and never bothered to find out the details." My mother's face was cycling through emotions: confusion, pride, embarrassment, and something that might have been guilt. "Honey, I don't understand. When I asked about your work, you always said you were just keeping busy." "Because every time I tried to talk about the business side of what I was doing, people's eyes would glaze over. When I mentioned profit margins or operational challenges, the conversation would shift to Charlotte's latest promotion or someone else's real job." My father, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke. $8 million? Annual revenue, yes. Net profit is about $1, $4 million per year. The number hit the room like a physical force. These were middle-class people who understood exactly what $1, $4 million in annual income meant. It wasn't just successful. It was wealthy. It was more money than most of them would see in a lifetime, earned by the family member they'd been pitying for over a decade. "But Sophie," said my cousin Jessica, "you drive that little Honda. You live in that apartment. If you're making that much money, why do you live so modestly?" This was the question I'd hoped someone would ask. Because I'm not interested in impressing people with what I own. I'm interested in building something sustainable and meaningful. I reinvest most of my profits back into the business, take care of my employees, and save for the future. The car gets me where I need to go. The apartment is comfortable. I don't need more than that. Charlotte looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "But people think you're struggling. People feel sorry for you." "Let them. Other people's opinions of my life don't pay my bills or determine my happiness." My Aunt Maria, who'd been fascinated by Charlotte's designer handbag the night before, asked quietly, "Are you happy, Sophie?" The question caught me off guard. In all the years of family gatherings and interrogations about my life choices, no one had ever asked if I was happy. "Yes," I said. "I love what I do. I love building something from nothing, creating jobs for people, making spaces where families and friends can celebrate together. I wake up every morning excited about the challenges ahead of me. So yes, I'm very happy." Over the next few weeks, everything changed. My parents, who'd spent years diplomatically deflecting questions about my career, were suddenly bragging about their daughter, the successful entrepreneur. My mother called her book club friends to update them on my restaurant empire. My father started reading restaurant industry publications so he could have informed conversations about my business. The family members who'd treated me like a cautionary tale were suddenly asking for business advice. My cousin David wanted to know about small business loans. My uncle Roberto asked about franchise opportunities. Even my Aunt Carmen, who'd never shown interest in anything more challenging than her garden club meetings, started talking about her entrepreneurial spirit. But the most dramatic change was in my relationship with Charlotte. She called me 3 days after the Goldman Sachs party, her voice smaller and more uncertain than I'd heard since we were children. "Sophie, I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I need to ask you something." "Okay. Do you hate me?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with 14 years of dismissive comments, patronizing smiles, and fundamental misunderstanding. "No, Charlotte, I don't hate you. But you're angry with me." I was angry. "I'm not sure what I am now." She was quiet for a moment. "I talked to Marcus about everything, about how we've treated you, about the assumptions we made. He feels terrible too." "Marcus doesn't need to feel terrible, he barely knows me." "That's kind of the problem, isn't it? We never bothered to really know you." I found myself softening despite my best efforts to stay guarded. This was the most honest conversation Charlotte and I had ever had. "The thing is," she continued, "I thought I was being the good sister. I thought I was succeeding for both of us, you know. Like if I did well enough, it would somehow balance out what I saw as your struggles." "Charlotte, I was never struggling." "I know that now, but for years, I genuinely believed you were lost and just too proud to ask for help. And I genuinely believed you thought I was a failure and just too polite to say it directly." We both laughed, though there wasn't much humor in it. "Sophie, I want to understand what you've built. I want to really understand it, not just the numbers but the whole thing. Would you show me?" The following Saturday, Charlotte drove down from Dallas to San Antonio for the first time in 3 years. Usually, our family meetings happened at my parents' house, or at some neutral location. She'd never been to my apartment, never seen any of my restaurants, never been part of my actual life. I picked her up at my flagship location, the original margaritas that I'd bought from Mrs. Rodriguez, now completely renovated but still serving the same core menu that had made it famous. Charlotte walked through the door wearing jeans and a simple sweater, looking more like the sister I remembered from childhood than the polished executive I'd gotten used to. "It's beautiful," she said, looking around at the exposed brick walls, the warm lighting, the open kitchen where customers could watch their food being prepared. "It feels authentic but sophisticated." That's exactly what I was going for. I introduced her to Patricia, who'd driven down from our Vista del Lago location to meet the infamous sister she'd heard so much about. Patricia was gracious but protective, the way she always was with people who might hurt me. "Sophie talks about you all the time," Patricia told Charlotte, which was a lie, but a kind one. We spent the morning touring 3 of my San Antonio locations, and I watched Charlotte's understanding of my business deepen with each stop. She saw the sophisticated point-of-sale systems, the inventory management software, the employee training programs. She met managers who'd been with me for years, servers who were working their way through college on the education benefits I provided, kitchen staff who owned stock in the company through our profit-sharing program. At our 3rd stop, Charlotte sat down across from me in a corner booth and asked the question I'd been waiting for. "How much do you actually know about business?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, I have an MBA from UT and 4 years of experience at Goldman Sachs, And some of the systems you've shown me today are more sophisticated than what we use for client management. Where did you learn all this? Everywhere. Books, online courses, industry conferences, trial and error. When you're responsible for keeping 12 restaurants profitable, you learn fast or you fail. Charlotte shook her head slowly. I can't believe I thought you were just serving tables all these years. To be fair, I do still serve tables sometimes, when we're short-staffed or I want to stay connected to the customer experience. But you're running a multi-million-dollar business. Yes. And you never went to business school. No. And you built all of this from a $12,000 investment. Over 14 years, yes. Charlotte leaned back in the booth, looking overwhelmed. Sophie, what you've accomplished is incredible. It's more impressive than anything I've done. It's not a competition, Charlotte. Isn't it, though? Hasn't it always been a competition between us? The question caught me off guard because it was true. From childhood, we'd been compared constantly. Charlotte, the academic achiever. Sophie, the creative dreamer. Charlotte, the one with the clear path. Sophie, the one who was finding herself. Even our parents had unconsciously created a dynamic where Charlotte's success was the family's success, and my struggles were everyone's disappointment. Maybe it was, I said finally, but I don't want it to be anymore. That evening, Charlotte and I sat in my apartment, the modest one-bedroom place I'd been living in for 6 years despite being able to afford something much larger. She looked around at my simple furniture, my wall of cookbooks, my framed restaurant reviews and business awards that I'd never mentioned to anyone. Why do you live here? She asked. You could afford a penthouse anywhere you wanted. Because I like it here. It's close to my restaurants. The rent is reasonable and I don't need much space. Besides, I spend most of my time working. But don't you want nice things? Don't you want people to know how successful you are? I considered the question carefully. I have nice things. They're just different from what you consider nice. I have a business I love, employees who respect me, customers who trust me to create special experiences for them. I have financial security and the freedom to make my own decisions. Those are the things that matter to me. Charlotte was quiet for a long time, staring at a framed photo on my bookshelf, a picture of me and my entire staff at last year's company holiday party, 43 people who worked across my 12 locations. I think I've been chasing the wrong things, she said finally. What do you mean? I've been so focused on looking successful that I forgot to think about whether I actually am successful. I mean, I make good money, and I have a nice title, but I hate my job most days. I work 70 hours a week for people who could replace me tomorrow without thinking twice about it. I spend more money than I make because I think I need to look the part of a successful Goldman Sachs executive. This was the most vulnerable I'd ever seen Charlotte. The polished exterior was completely gone, replaced by someone who looked lost and uncertain. Meanwhile, you built something that matters. You created jobs for dozens of people. You've been making a profit every year for over a decade. You have employees who've been with you for years because they believe in what you're building. Charlotte, you're successful too. You've accomplished incredible things. Have I? Or have I just been good at playing a role that other people defined for me? I didn't know how to answer that question, so I waited for her to continue. When I was talking to those senior partners at your restaurant, I realized something. They were more impressed by what you've built than by anything I've accomplished at Goldman. And the crazy thing is, they were right to be impressed. What you've done is harder and more meaningful than what I do. Different doesn't mean better or worse, Charlotte. No, but impact does. Sophie, you've created something that will outlast you. You've built a legacy. I'm just another finance person in a city full of finance people. We talked until 3 a.m. that night, and for the first time in our adult lives, we talked like equals. Charlotte told me about the pressure she felt to maintain her lifestyle, the crushing student loan debt from her MBA program, the anxiety she felt about whether she'd ever make partner. I told her about the sleepless nights during my first few years as a business owner, the times I'd almost gone bankrupt, the loneliness of making decisions that affected dozens of people's livelihoods. By the end of the conversation, something fundamental had shifted between us. The competition was over, and we'd both won. 6 months have passed since that December night when Charlotte said, "At least I'm not just a waitress," and everything in my family has changed. Charlotte left Goldman Sachs in February. She'd been thinking about it for months, but our conversation that night in my apartment finally gave her the courage to make the leap. She's now working as a consultant for small restaurant chains, helping them with financial planning and growth strategies. Her income dropped by about 40%, but she's happier than I've seen her since we were kids. Marcus, surprisingly, has been incredibly supportive of Charlotte's career change. He's also stopped wearing bow ties, which everyone agrees is an improvement. My parents have become my biggest cheerleaders, the way they always were for Charlotte. My mother keeps a scrapbook of every article written about my restaurants. My father has learned to navigate our point-of-sale system better than some of my employees. They finally understand what I've been building all these years, and they're proud of it. But the most significant change has been in how I see myself. For 14 years, I carried the weight of my family's disappointment, even while I was building something extraordinary. I let their limited understanding of success define how I felt about my own achievements. I hid my accomplishments because I was tired of defending them, but in doing so, I also hid from the recognition and respect I'd earned. The night of Charlotte's revelation taught me something crucial. Other people's inability to see your value doesn't diminish that value. Their failure to understand your success doesn't make you unsuccessful. Their dismissal of your dreams doesn't make those dreams any less valid or impressive when you achieve them. I'm not angry with my family anymore. I understand now that they were operating from their own limited perspective, just like I was operating from mine. The difference is that I was building something real, while they were building assumptions based on incomplete information. Today, Bella Vista Restaurant Group is expanding into 2 new states. We're opening 5 new locations this year, and I'm exploring opportunities to franchise our model to other entrepreneurs who want to build their own restaurant empires. Industry publications are calling us the future of fast casual dining, and several major investment firms have approached me about acquisition opportunities. I'm not interested in selling, but I am interested in continuing to prove that success comes in many forms. Some people climb corporate ladders. Some people build businesses from scratch. Some people measure their worth in stock options and corner offices. Some people measure their worth in the lives they've improved and the communities they've built. There's room for all of us. Charlotte and I have dinner together every month now, alternating between her favorite upscale restaurants in Dallas and my various locations across Texas. We talk about business, relationships, our parents, and the future we're both building on our own terms. Last month, she brought me a gift. A framed photo of us from Christmas night, taken during the family gathering where she delivered that devastating, "At least I'm not just a waitress" line. In the photo, I'm sitting at the kids' table, smiling politely while the adults around me discuss Charlotte's latest achievements. "I want you to remember this moment," she told me, "not because of what I said that hurt you, but because of who you were that night. You were sitting there, being dismissed and underestimated, while secretly running a multi-million-dollar business. You were confident enough in what you'd built that you didn't need to defend it or prove it to anyone. That's the kind of strength I'm still learning to develop." The photo sits on my desk now, next to pictures of my restaurants and my employees. It reminds me that the most powerful position you can be in is when people underestimate you while you're busy exceeding their expectations. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, If you've ever been dismissed by people who should support you, if you've ever built something meaningful while others questioned your choices, I want you to know that your success doesn't require anyone else's permission or recognition. Build what matters to you. Create value in whatever way feels authentic. Measure your worth by your own standards, not by other people's limited understanding of what success should look like. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, building something extraordinary, and letting the results speak for themselves. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have revealed your success earlier, or would you have let the assumptions continue? Have you ever been underestimated by people who should have known better? Drop a comment below and share your own story of being underestimated or dismissed. I read every single comment, and I love hearing about how you've overcome other people's limited expectations of who you could become. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about family drama, business success, and the sweet satisfaction of proving doubters wrong. I post new stories every Tuesday and Friday, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for watching, and remember, your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to see it. Keep building, keep growing, and keep proving them wrong simply by being exactly who you're meant to be. Until next time, this is Sophia Martinez reminding you that success looks different for everyone, and that's exactly how it should be.